came out of the Louisiana bayou, an unlikely legend with a skinny frame, tousled hair, and floppy socks. They called him Pistol Pete. He put his signature on everything he did. The thousands of points, the dazzling moves, none of them ever patented. Each one original. Never seen before, never seen again. Nothing Pete Maravich ever did was simple or serene or ordinary. Not in life. Not even on the court, the one place where he should have felt most comfortable, most at ease. Flashy and electric, Pete turned basketball into theater. For better or worse, he was the consummate showman, always in the spotlight, always on center stage.
Pete ate, drank, and slept basketball.
He lived for it. It was his life. That's what he was born to do.
He was more fun to watch than anybody I've ever seen in the game. Flopping around with his hair, socks hanging down over his shoes, behind his back, through his legs, spinning, shooting from all different angles. He was just a show.
Pistol felt an obligation. He never wanted the fans to feel like they were ever cheated. He wanted to make sure that he did his thing.
He had an element of genius in his personality with the basketball. But then there was a side to him. He had these big, brown, sad-looking eyes.
He was at the top of the mountain. He heard so much roar of the crowd. But there was a lot of heartache and a lot of tragedy that he lived through.
I don't think Pete was ever at peace with Pete Maravich. It wasn't easy being Pistol Pete.
It's showtime.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. Come inside, the show's about to start. Guaranteed to blow your head apart. Last of the show, don't get your money's worth. This show, it happened all right. You gotta see the show. It's a rock and roll. You gotta see the show. It's rock and roll. Oh, right before your eyes, we put laughter from the skies. And he laughs until he cries. And he dies, and he dies. Come inside, the show's about to start. Guaranteed to blow your head apart. You gotta see the show. It's a dynamo. You gotta see the show. It's rock and roll.
He was revolutionary. What he did, no one had ever done before. Nobody had ever handled the ball like that. He did things with the ball that Bob Cousy in his dreams at night could not do.
He was really an artist, a dancer, a person who played with music in his ears. You could not stop him.
He could go from inline to inline with the basketball in the heat of battle. Quicker, faster than anyone I'd ever seen.
You can see his eyes light up from time to time because he knew he was going to mess you up along the way, you know. He was going to do something to just undress you. Whoa.
Pete made the ball disappear. One guy back, the guy was backpedaling, and then Pete swiped at the ball like this to tip it over here and hit over the ball. The defensive man went that way, and he slapped it back this way. And the referee called traveling on him. He said, traveling? How do you know it was traveling? You have never seen anyone do that before.
We just bounce around out there, and the ball just seemed like it was something that he had from the time he was in a cradle, creating different ways in which to just display his love for the game. Here was a guy who was a basketball genius.
Come see the show.
In 1956, when Pete was 9, Pete Maravich became the head coach at Clemson. Under his father's watchful eye, Pete continued his basketball education.
He was always playing somebody better than him, somebody bigger than him, somebody stronger than he was.
He was always scrimmaging with college kids, even when he was in 7th, 8th grade. Bones McKinney, who was the head coach at Wake Forest, had Cousy down there, and Cousy participated in the scrimmage. Pete Maravich inserted Pete, and Pete threw a long bounce pass with some English on it that someone picked up for a layup, and Cousy grabbed the ball and put it under his arm and said, "Time out. Who in the hell is that kid?"
I remember playing a lot of horse with him.
Pete would want to play horse with him.
We would play horse. He invented more shots.
And one of the shots that I could never do was
spin the ball off the elbow, spinning the ball off the head,
go through his legs, around his back,
spinning the ball and off the knee,
spin it off his finger, bump it off his head,
around the back at midcourt,
close his eyes, and score.
He could make 3 out of 5 consistently from half court by throwing the ball up in the air and it bounce around the foul line and back in.
By the time he had reached junior high, Pete had mastered the game well enough to play varsity basketball at Daniel High School. It was an amazing accomplishment considering his size.
He was 11 or 12, absolutely scrawny, just tiny, no meat on his bones. I mean, you wondered how he could even run because he had no muscles.
He was so small that the other teams wouldn't put anybody on him to guard him. I mean, it was a joke putting this little squirt out there on the court, and yet he would go down the court and he'd shoot off of his hip.
Pete was not strong enough to shoot a jump shot. He shot like he was drawing a holster. But Pete could score. To give Pete a 28-footer was to give him something he could do 7 out of 10 times.
And you would think, well, I can block that. So you go out to block it. He went around you.
But the high hopes for Pete's basketball were almost derailed by his low self-esteem.
He wouldn't ever come to practice on time. It drove the coach nuts. He finally realized that the older kids were giving him a hard time because he was immature physically, and they'd make fun of him. So he never undressed in front of the team. Gosh, when you're in the 8th grade, you're 12 or 13. These guys were 17 or 18. Well, he was a kid to them, a child. I'm sure he was terrified, but he never showed it. And the coach said, scoring this many points, who cares if he's 5 minutes?
Pistol Pete grew to be like 6'6", with arms that made him 6'7", 6'8", but his size enhanced his skills immensely.
By his junior year, Pete had moved on to Raleigh's Broughton High, where he elevated his game and electrified the crowd.
He averaged 33 points, went over 47 points 4 different times. At that time, he wanted to be the best basketball player in the world, and he did everything he could do to achieve that goal.
I coached basketball 32 years. I've never been around any human being that take the game as seriously and have a passion for it like Pistol Pete Maravich.
I played 6 to 10 hours a day, and I was really a basketball android. That's the only thing I was committed to. I was totally dedicated and possessed by basketball. There was nothing else in my life.
The first time I saw him was on campus, walking around the quadrangle. It wasn't hard to spot who Pete Maravich was. Floppy hair, tall, skinny, 6'5" kid. Back then, freshmen didn't play on the varsity. His average in his freshman year was in the 40s. The buzz around town was, you better get there early.
A year later, Pete moved up to the varsity, and LSU basketball was never the same.
They would turn the lights out at LSU. Come on the floor, he came out spit on the basketball, and it was showtime. Carnival atmosphere, Mardi Gras, Pistol Pete Maravich.
Before Pete, the South only rose for football, but that was before Maravich made basketball fashionable, before they began calling LSU Maravich University.
Pete would fill arenas all over the SEC, arenas that'd be half empty.
For the first time, there was a figure who filled basketball arenas from one end of the South to the other.
Pete's name was dynamite. I'll never will forget the Alabama game in 1970. That's Bear Bryant country. That's football country. And as we flew over Tuscaloosa, they had about 4 lines, about 400 to 500 yards long, waiting to get a ticket to see Pistol Pete play. Many places we went, the marquees at the hotels would say, "Welcome, Pistol Pete," in LSU. Everywhere we went on the road, they came to see the pistol. His gun was always loaded, and he was always firing.
Without the spectators, you don't have any athletics. And what I try to do is just give the spectators $3 or $3.50 a ticket worth of enjoyment.
Get a seat.
The worst feeling I've ever had in my life, other than a letter from a divorce lawyer, was going down to Baton Rouge on Saturday night, going into that crazy cow palace they had with 10,000 half-drunk Cajuns, and knowing you had to hold their hero under 50 points. It was just a bad feeling, believe me.
Some of his shots were experimental. You never saw these things in practice. He'd just all of a sudden just come up with something. You're at the top of the key and you get by your man, and you have the big center right there. And instead of shooting it, he throws it up against the backboard. The immediate reaction of the rest of the players is to turn and look. He catches it off the backboard, and as they come back, he slips right by and puts it right in for a layup. As he turns to dribble down court, there's a defender right there in a defensive stance, this close. And he turned and he put that ball through that defender's legs, circled him, and kept dribbling. The defender's just...
I don't think he ever shot on balance in his life. He was always falling one way or another. He would shoot leaning shots. And when he got hot, you could forget it. You wasn't not going to stop him.
Well, he's just an excitable boy.
I had an opportunity to guard Pete. We held him to 17 points in the first half in that ball game. We were really proud of that. Unfortunately, he got 41 in the second half.
We were playing Tulane down there, and their coach kept yelling, "Make him go left, make him go left, you can't go left." They held him to about 60 points that night, so obviously you could go left.
And you got to remember, that was with no three-point line.
The numbers he would have rung up would have been frightening. Conservatively, you'd have to give him 10, 12 points a game more, which gets him up into 55, 56 points a game, which is absurd.
He was the best passer and ball handler I have ever seen. He made some phenomenal passes. Behind his back.
Around his head.
Between his legs.
The blind passes.
In his 3 varsity seasons, the boy with the floppy socks not only ruined reputations, he scored more than 50 points in a game 28 times, averaged more than 44 points a game, and broke every scoring record in LSU history. And he didn't stop there. By the time Pistol Pete was through shooting, he had sped past the great Oscar Robertson to become the most prolific scorer in college basketball history.
I think I'm very fortunate to break his record because I followed him ever since I was a young boy, and I always felt he was the greatest.
He was a performer, and he knew he was. He was on stage. He lived for the roar of the crowd. Some people have never heard it. He heard it every night.
before the 1975 season, Pete was traded to the New Orleans Jazz, a first-year expansion team desperate to make some noise.
He had the goatee and the purse, had a pistol on the side of it, smoke coming out of it. He was the whole thing. No one seemed to even pay attention to anybody else. He was back on stage.
I really can't see any other place that compares with this town.
He was the first rock star I ever hung around with. He carried over to airports and hotel lobbies, and he was bigger than life, and that carried right on under the floor.
Pistol Pete. It echoed through the building.
On October the 10th, 1974, Helen Maravich took her own life.
When Helen died, they had the funeral up in Aliquippa. Pete didn't say anything to anybody. He was there in body. God knows where he was elsewhere.
His eyes got soft and subdued as opposed to big and intense. We couldn't find Pete after a game, and so about 4 or 5 of us split up, went back into town, and went looking for him. I found him in a bar and then took him back to the hotel. The effect on him was immense.
As he struggled to cope with his mother's death, Pete found comfort on the court. Through the expansion chaos of the first 5 Jazz seasons, Maravich made the All-Star team 3 times, led the league in scoring, and transformed his game.
We were very competitive, and it was because Peter was less of a star. He was no less better of a player. He was actually a better player, but he was less of a star. Learn how to play winning basketball, evolve a winning attitude, and yet also provide the thrill that the people wanted, which was always something fancy. It was a tightrope, but by that year, he had mastered it, and he was really a great pro.
Pete goes out against the New York Knicks, one of the best teams in the NBA at the time, up against Walt Frazier, who was on the all-defensive team just about every year.
I just remember Frazier really tired of it all, because he was just raining down jumpers on him.
So the pistol lets it fly. A charter flight back to New York. Here's a Maravich shot in the lane.
And what a show he put on. He scores 68 points.
That was not a quiet 68. He was making sure that the guys out on the floor knew he was getting it.
And Walt Frazier turned to Earl Monroe once, and Earl the Pearl said, "No, man, you're the defensive genius. You stay with him."
He was all-NBA first team. He was considered, if not the premier guard, certainly one of the top 3 or 4 guards in the league, no doubt about it.
But Pete's most productive period as a pro would come to an abrupt end.
January 31st, 1978.
We were ahead about 20 points in the game. Pete got the ball out on a fast break and looked up.
He rifled a behind the back, through the legs, half-court bounce pass. Crowd goes crazy, and he hits his leg wrong, collapses in a heap.
It was really never quite the same after that.
I can remember when Pete got traded from Atlanta, where he started his career, over to New Orleans when the team went down there in his expansion team. And they had never won a game. They were 0-14, and they were the worst team in the league. And Otto Moore was the center, and they couldn't do anything, but Pete was just lighting them up. And the Portland Trailblazers, we go in there, we had a team, and it was not the championship team, but we had a good enough team. And we were pounding them early, way up at halftime, and Pete in the second half just takes over. And he goes absolutely wild. He's playing 1 against 5, and he's up and down the court shooting jumpers, hooks, full court behind the back passes through guys' legs. He's just everything. And at the very last play of the game, we're up 1, and Pete dribbles up. 4 of our guys go chase him because they know he's not going to pass it, and he's falling out of bounds, and he shoots it as he's tumbling over the row of fans in the corner.
Literally.
And I am standing underneath the basket waiting for the last rebound of the game. We're going to win the game, and they're not going to win a game ever, the New Orleans Jazz. And the ball swishes perfectly through the net. He's unbelievable. And he reminds me a lot, if you can compare him to anybody, to Steve Nash today, although Pete was much bigger. Pete's 6'5", and much more athletic in terms of the jumping ability until he tore his knee up. I mean, that really changed everything for Pete. Amazing about Pete, 44 points per game, career, for 3 straight years in an era with no three-point line. Dale Brown, who coached at LSU after Press and Pete were there, Dale Brown went back and charted all the games with the running score. You know, Maravich free throw, Maravich 22-foot jumper, Maravich layup. And he calculated that with the current college three-point rule at 19.9, Pete Maravich would have averaged 13 three-point makes per game, which would have given him a career average of 57 points per game under today's rules. That guy is unbelievable. We love him. We missed him terribly. What a great friend.
You're looking at Pete Maravich. While at LSU, he established a record as the greatest scorer in college history.
Boy, could he play basketball and could he entertain you. The no-look passes, the dribble the ball, then pat it with one hand. That's where I saw that from Pistol Pete. That's where I got it from.
Pistol's doing it all. A great ball game.
I don't know how you stop him. He is too much.
Cal, I don't know about you, but I'm running out of things to say about Maravich.
It was like the ball was an extension of him. He could shoot it from deep. He could take it in. He could wrap it around. I mean, he was doing stuff that you never saw.
Boy, he's got all kinds of moves. What move doesn't this guy have?
Pete just has so much razzle-dazzle in his game. He was just hard to guard. Ball handling and dribbling and stuff like that. He could just trick guys.
Boy, he is an offensive machine.
Pistol was like a guy, the game was boring to him, so he had to create things to keep him interested. He had to go through his legs or 2 times around his back.
Behind the back, how do you do? A little showtime there.
Pete was clearly one of the first mega personalities that broke onto the scene, and one of the real leaders in bringing basketball into this sort of area of artistry.
Maravich with an underhanded pass over to Stumpy, and Goodrich goes for 2.
Pete was doing a lot of things that had us all sitting around saying, wow, man, look at that guy. Did you see that pass? Did you see that move? Did you see this? And so we were all just sitting there in amazement.
Incredible, absolutely incredible.
I would like to be remembered as a person that played the game for one standpoint, to entertain the fans.
And the crowd is going wild here at the Superdome.
Because we're here only for a short period of time, and I think it's very important that we touch as many people as we can.
Charles Barkley is one that sticks out most in my mind. He's the one that came up, pulled me and my brother to the side, told us Dad would have been real proud of us.
I've only met Pete Maravich one time in my life, and he says, you know what, you were my favorite player. And I wanted to make sure to let them know that I acknowledged that and I appreciated that. That's one of the greatest compliments
the
I
guy
ever had.
that could do it all, I mean, offensively, and we used to talk about it, you know, a lot, you know, even talk with him because we were friends, and the things that he did, he practiced them. Nothing that he did was so much spontaneous. It was because he had done these things over and over again in practice.
He totally impressed me coming in because I thought he was mainly an offensive player. But he worked hard on the defensive end, and that totally blew me away.
If we didn't win those last couple games, we would not be in first place in the division. And Pistol just took over the game and shot us into the best record.
There's the whistle, and the first letter goes up on Hawkins.
You played Pete in horse, and it was an adventure because you go like, okay, I got no chance of beating him the first time.
Pistol can make that ball talk, I think.
Pistol Pete is a natural nickname. Maravich intercepted. They had a 2-on-1 break. Maravich, let's see what he'll do. Maravich is hitting 1,000. And that's the guy they came to see, Pete Maravich.
Having the kind of career he had in college and bringing that same game and style in the pros, you know, really make people, or I would say the people that didn't really get a chance to see him, really miss something. We lost him too early, you know, because I think his accomplishment to the game of basketball, man, and how he played it and how he loved it and how he can do things with that basketball that most couldn't.
Okay.
Leonard, Gervin. We gonna remember it for a long time.
Man, you couldn't steal it from Pistol Pete. He come down there and make up shots in the air.
You're looking at Pistol Pete Maravich, in my opinion, the greatest playmaker playing today.
NCAA scoring champion at LSU, twice an NBA scoring champion.
You go back and you look at film of what this guy was actually doing with the basketball.
Watch him for a moment, and then try to conjure the right word. And while you watch,
that ball looks like a part of his hand.
And I said, he must spend a lot of time dribbling and dribbling.
How many hours a day would you spend with a basketball, bouncing and shooting, and say when you're 12 years old?
When I was 12, Don, during the summer months, about 8 hours a day, between 8 and 8.5, and during the winter months, about 4
He got
hours.
68 on us, as you know, when I was with the Knicks. And I used to tell Clyde and Butch Beard that he only got 6 on me.
You're watching basketball history for Pete Maravich tonight. Here's a basket for him if he can convert. 68 for Maravich, and a steal. Look at him fight for this ball. The Pistols doing it all. A great ball game. And the crowd is going wild here at the Super.
Pistol Pete at 2, because for me, he was the first, no offense, Brent, he was the first white guy with style and flair that I've seen. So
why would I take offense to that comment?
Because you're a white guy. You're the first white guy to have the flash and style and between the legs and behind the back. I mean, because my favorite move was the move he did to Jerry West.
Pete Maravich, he would take the basketball, right, and he would fake the pass. He would bounce it here, bounce it behind him, fake the pass, and you as a defender would jump, and he'd turn back around, catch the ball, and shoot. That was a hell of a move. And I was like, okay, I got to try that. So I tried it in the game, and Steve Coulter stole it.
Pistol was like a guy, the game was boring to him, so he had to create things to keep him interested.
He just has so much razzle-dazzle in his game.
Most artists, when they are living, people don't recognize them and recognize their great talent until after they're gone. And I think this is what really happened to Pete Maravich.
Just do what I think he did. You were never quite sure what he was going to do with the ball in the open court because he had 1,000 moves to either shoot it or pass it.
Give him that much room and he'll burn you.
Nobody handled the ball better than Pistol. But he wasn't just satisfied with that. He had to put a little show on for the fans.
I asked him once if he'd ever played a perfect game. He said, no, but I'm going to. So some night I'm going to take 40 shots and I'm going to make them all.
He was an entertainer at heart, and his ability to pass the ball and dribble the ball and do outlandish things on the court, which sometimes even overruled the game. That was Pete Maravich.
And people always say dribble. He handled the ball like it was a yo-yo. He could go this way with it, got that way with it. He could put it this way. Next thing you know, the yo-yo goes out that way, but the yo-yo was the basketball, okay? The basketball was like an invisible string on his hand. I mean, he could really handle the ball.
Don't you get the feeling that when you're doing these things, the ball becomes sort of an extension of your hand?
Exactly. That's exactly how I felt.
Feet fake left, go right, come back. Look at him yo-yo the ball. Spin it left side of grip. Back to A.J. The magic man Maravich. Maravich to the free throw line. Pete turned, pirouette, put it up. Right over the net. Beautiful shot.
He's got some shooting touch. What a great shooter he is.
I don't think there's a basketball player that ever played this game that could score as fast as Maravich.
Well, Pete was a tougher competitor in himself with his floppy socks and laissez-faire attitude, you know, on it.
I was labeled very young as a showman. To try to bring fans back, you have to do something other than just put the ball in the hoop.
He shot a shot one time in practice. He came down on the break. He shot it, he let it go, he turned around and started running, and as the ball ripped the net, he said, he did did this, and we all went like, Larry did that, Larry got that from him. And he would do stuff like that. I was like, man, how good is that guy? He shoots the ball, turns around and he runs it. As it's ripping the net, he just does that. Then we'd play horse. And he had some shots where he'd jump out of bounds. He had shots I never thought of ever shooting shots.
Outside the line, jump in with 2 feet.
This is a trick shot now.
Come in the line, off the backboard, spin on.
There you go, Bubbles.
He's got a lot of tricks.
Rub it on in, spin it off the backboard.
It's got to be a bank.
Got to be a bank.
There's the whistle, and the first letter goes up on Hawkins.
The results were historic. His college scoring records, the ones he set with uncommon flair, will likely stand forever, equaled only by his professional career, in which he was chosen as one of the top 50 players in the history of the NBA.
You can be the greatest on the face of the earth. That's something, if you want to do that bad enough.
Pete Maravich was so far ahead of his time, he was 10 plays ahead of everyone else.
Greatness. That was Pete Maravich.
Did he just do what I think he did?
Having the kind of career he had in college and bringing that same game and style in the pros, you know, really make people, or I would say the people that didn't really get a chance to see him, really miss something. We lost him too early, you know, because I think his accomplishment to the game of basketball, man, and how he played it and how he loved it and how he can do things with that basketball that most couldn't.
Okay. Leonard, Gervin.
We gonna remember it for a long time, man.
25-footer Magic Man, he hits.
The 6 games that we played against each other in college, I think Pete averaged over 50 points a game, but we won all 6 games.
Pete took losing pretty bad. I think that's why, even though he was scoring a lot of points, I think Pete would have been happier, you know, if he'd scored less and we won some of the ball games that we lost.
Pete Maravich falls somewhere between the Globetrotters and the And One Tour in basketball history in terms of what he could do with a basketball. How far ahead of his time was he as a ball handler and a passer?
Tremendous. He had all the tricks, basically. He could play in any era. He would dribble between his legs, behind his back, throw great passes, had great shooting range, and he was a great scorer. He had 68 points in one game, averaged 31 points one season when he led the NBA in scoring. So he could play in any era, the era before, during, or even today.